a man who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. The best doorway in the universe lets you into or out of, depending on which direction you're going, the Organic Man Coffee Trike Coffee Shop. 4501 McPherson is where you will find the best coffee in the universe. Coffee lets you get things done. Coffee helps you think. Coffee is the best thing since sliced bread. Coffee will save you from a werewolf if it's hot and you throw it on him. Or you just hand it to him and tell him to drink up. If you can't get there from there, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. Life is too short to drink bad coffee. Last week I talked about cults and how Jim Jones got over 900 people to commit suicide in Jonestown. I had started working on it the week before. Vic Hermanson just released a show on Trailer Trash Terrors about Jim Jones. He went into a lot more detail on Just the People's Temple and how communism is the most evil group on the earth. Vic had spent maybe 2 weeks working on his show. We had never talked about what we were working on. It just never came up. We send each other texts and messages and emails all the time, but we don't discuss what we're working on mostly. So it's kind of weird. I don't like coincidences. This world isn't that orderly. This isn't the first time I've done a show only to discover that some of the other podcasts I listen to are about the same subject. One week, I think there were 4 of us all talking about the same thing. And it wasn't any kind of current event. And not like when everybody was talking about the drones. The drones seen all over the United States that all seem to have vanished right around the time of the administration change. No, for unknown and unfathomable reasons, some of us think about strange things at the same time. Makes me wonder about those weird thoughts that just kind of jump into your head when you're not thinking about something. Is there some entity out there somewhere sending out mind waves telling us what to focus on and when? Some might say it's the government. Why would they be getting us to talk about weird cryptids or people who vanished hundreds of years ago? If it was some kind of government agency sending out mind control waves, you'd think they'd be saying, government good, conspiracies bad, or something like that. If not the government, how about aliens? If aliens, then why focus on just people doing podcasts? I never hear from listeners who say they were just thinking about Hale Bop last week. There's something weird going on, and I'm not too sure I want to know. Life is strange, and the answers might make it even stranger. We were at my sister-in-law and brother-in-law's anniversary the other night. We went to the Asian Bistro on Shiloh. I was sitting there staring off into space like I do when I don't have a book in front of me. I looked down a hallway and there was a door there. Probably where they keep their mops and brooms. It got me to thinking about a book I'd read twice. It's called The House of Leaves. Em is upset with one of the cats for sitting on the couch when she wanted to sit on the couch. Anyway, The House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I used to have a hardcover copy signed by the writer. I gave it to my nephew. Hope he still has it. It might be worth a few bucks, like maybe $20. If you've read The House of Leaves, you'll know what it is and how it is put together. If you haven't, it is an experience all in itself. The book has been described as the Blair Witch on paper. Some say it is confusing, while others find it to be eye-opening. The book starts out as the story of a Johnny Truant who finds an unfinished manuscript in an old house. He begins to read the story and finds out it is a transcribed manuscript of the Navidson records written by a guy named Zampano. Zampano filmed activity at a house that defies the ideas of haunting. Will Navidson had bought a house in the country and moved his family in without any problems. He was a photojournalist and his life revolved around photography. Navidson installs cameras throughout the house to capture candid family moments. As he's going over the images, he notices there are doors in places that didn't used to have doors. And they opened onto new rooms that extended impossibly beyond the house's outside dimensions. I'm not going to give you any more details, but the book is worth your effort to get a copy and read it. It's not on Kindle. You'll have to flip the pages. If it was on Kindle, I don't think it would work right. It's a page turner in more ways than one. Some pages, the words run around the edge, and in others, there might be just one word on each page. That door at the end of the hall at the Asian Bistro got me to thinking about things showing up or disappearing in weird locations. How many kids have issues with closet doors, especially at night? Have you ever wondered why? Most parents think this is just kids being weird, like that movie, Monsters, Inc., back when Disney was still entertaining. As I went around talking to folks about their experiences, I heard a few stories of closets holding more than clothes. Raoul and his wife had bought their dream home. It was on the north side of town, up past Loop 20. Now their kids didn't all have to share one room. One day, as Raoul was walking to the kitchen, he saw his wife in the bathroom by the sink. Nothing to do with the closet yet. He kept going, and then seconds later, he saw his wife in the kitchen. This was odd, so he doubled back and he looked in the bathroom once more. It was empty. There was no way she could have gotten from the bathroom to the kitchen because the only way there would have been in the hallway that he was standing in. A few weeks later, he could see that somebody was standing in the closet. The door has a slight gap and the shadow was quite distinct. Thinking one of the kids was hiding there trying to surprise him, Raoul yanked the door open only to find an empty closet. The property where their dream house was built had been a ranch many years ago, and there's no telling what might have lingered on long after the property was developed. Robert told me that he's been seeing shadow beings in their home for years. The being is tall, about 7 foot 6, and very thin. His wife has seen the shadow as well. Surprisingly, they see the shadow being more often when they're together than when they're apart. Their son, Robert Jr., says that he sees this shadow being in his closet or in the corner of his bedroom. One day, while visiting Slaughter's Park, Robert Jr. had somebody take a photo of him and his girlfriend. When he looked at the image, he saw a man standing behind them. The man in the photo was only half there. The side of him farthest from them was practically invisible. You could see right through him. Could this be the thing that he'd seen in his closet, for just another weird thing that people run into? Folks who see shadow beings sometimes also see cryptids and UFOs. It's as if their minds are tuned to the frequency, allowing them to see things that others don't see or convince themselves they don't see. Liz and her sister Lynn are both energy sensitives. This means they can both feel and sense things going on with those around them. If a person is sick or has a bad attachment, the sisters can feel it. When somebody passes away, Liz or her sister will pray for their soul to find its way to the proper place. On many occasions, they've even seen spirits of the dead. My wife also sees things like this. This might be why her and these two young ladies get along so well. One day, while the pair was praying for lost souls, they'd opened the window to the room so that energy could exit. Anytime you're messing with energy in your home, you want to give it a way out. The window was old and heavy, and it took both of them to move the sash up to its highest location. With the window wide open, they began their efforts to move these souls along. With a sudden crash, the window slammed shut. This startled the two sisters. Once their hearts had slowed down from the fright, they went to see what was up with the rather down with the window. Not only had it closed, but the latch had flipped shut as well. Something trying to keep something else out? Late at night, while Liz was studying, she hears somebody moving to her bed and then taking a seat. The mattress makes the groaning noise. She can hear and feel the person, but she's alone in her room when this happens. Some unseen spirit coming to visit. She was awoken one morning by the sound of her alarm clock going off. It should have said 6 a.m., only the clock said it was 3. She realized that this wasn't her alarm clock that she was using, but this was an old clock that she had in a room that wasn't working. Lynn is also sensitive. She can feel and hear as well as see spirits. She wakes up a lot between 3 and 5 a.m. with a feeling of somebody in her room. She feels them breathing next to her, as if they're trying to get her attention. During one of these 3 a.m. disturbances, she saw a young girl run out the door and into the hallway. This girl was wearing a light blue dress with orange flowers. She didn't tell me what color the girl's hair was. I'm wondering if this could have been the little girl seen all over town. She had on a hat as well. Lynn wonders who this girl was and why she came to visit in the middle of the night. One day, taking a shower, she stood there with the curtain closed when she heard somebody enter the bathroom. She assumed it was her mother or her sister. She could hear cabinet doors open and things being moved around. She asked who it was and what they were looking for, but there was no answer. Instead, it just got real quiet. She figured that they must have left. Once she had finished, she walked into the kitchen where her mother and sister were. She asked them who had come into the bathroom, to which they both said they had stayed in the kitchen the whole time. Lynn tried to not let this bother her until later when she was back in the bathroom. On the mirror were two handprints. These prints were far bigger than any of them could have made. They looked more like a large man had placed his hands on the mirror. She thinks this was the spirit of somebody seeking help. They had a friend who is a psychic come by and look around their home. This friend told them that there was a portal in the closet of Lynn's bedroom. The portal may connect to purgatory or some other similar location. Why it's in the closet is anyone's guess, but this might explain some of these late night visits. Lynn wonders why she was the one chosen to have spirits visiting in the middle of the night, and why is her closet connected to another dimension. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Tony Merkel on the Confessionals had what I consider the best Bigfoot interview ever. Well, he didn't interview Bigfoot. He interviewed a truck driver who lived on a ranch in Louisiana who had had several odd encounters. In episode 383, A Trucker's Bigfoot Property, Tony was joined by Dylan, who had creatures on his property since he was a little child. The land he lived on was passed down through the family for generations, and what lived in the woods was not spoken about unless there was a real reason to. Dylan recalls three separate occasions in his childhood where a Bigfoot made itself known. But despite three encounters, he managed to convince himself that this was just something that happened. He even says he thought that it was just a gorilla living on the land in Louisiana. It wasn't until Dylan was an adult that he locked eyes with something and understood what was really happening. Then all of these memories of his childhood flashed before his eyes and started to make sense. Dylan also said when he was very young, he had a little boy living in his closet. It was one of those with the twin doors on either side of a small piece of wall. The boy would look out from one door and then move over and look out from the other one. Dylan never questioned why anyone would hang out in his closet until years later. I also found it very amusing. Dylan was was doing the interview from his truck. He was in Laredo at the time. He was waiting to pick up a load. He had driven from a nice, cool location into the hottest part of the world. Well, something like that. Dylan was in Laredo on his phone talking to Tony in Pennsylvania. Tony was broadcasting to me here in Laredo, well, along with everybody else that was listening. I've gone back and listened to this podcast 3 or 4 times now. On Expanded Perspectives, Cam and Kyle talk about a story sent to them from a listener. The woman, I'll call her Bonnie because I can't remember if she gave her name or not, or if she even did, Bonnie and her husband were at an outdoor public event. They had been there long enough to necessitate a visit to the Porta-Johns. There were units for both genders. Can you imagine how difficult this arrangement would have been last year at this time when there were 267 genders? I'm getting off of the story. Bonnie needed to make a phone call. She needed to visit the office, powder her nose. She had to respond to the call of nature. No, the guys on Expanded Perspectives didn't use any of these idiomatic expressions. Bonnie needed a porta-john, and so she went and got in line. There was a woman right in front of her who stepped into the female bathroom and closed the door. Bonnie stood there waiting and waiting. Why is it the more you need a bathroom, the longer the wait time? When the clock had ticked by way too much, Bonnie began to get concerned. Maybe this woman inside was having some kind of emergency. You do know that a lot of folks have heart attacks while trying to pass a deuce. Drop a log, take a dump. Go number 2. I think it has something to do with the Valsalva maneuver. Straining to pass the unpassable causes your blood pressure to drop. Strain enough and it drops all the way to 0. As concern turned to worry, Bonnie finally knocked on the door and asked if everything was okay. There was no response. She knocked again, and finally she tried pulling the door open. The porta-john was empty. It wasn't as if Bonnie had seen this other woman from far off and might have mistaken which John she went into. Bonnie was right behind her as she went in. Porta-johns do not have a second exit. The only way out was, well, if the other woman had jumped into the storage container down there in the blue water. Bonnie told her husband what she had just seen and asked what he thought was going on. He said there must be some kind of a portal inside the porta-john. A portal john, if you will. Think about that next time you heed the call of nature at a outside public event. Way, maybe a few more ways back in time, folks used to have 1 or 2 sets of clothing that they wore, and well, that was it. A bag might hold 1 or 2 items, but this was not for everyone. Some people just had the one set. Extras could be kept in a trunk or a crate. The rich folks who might have special outfits for special occasions, they kept them on shelves or in a niche built into the wall. In the Renaissance, chests of drawers built to hold things not currently in use came into use. Some chests were placed on stands, making them look more elegant. In the 18th centuries, armoires became increasingly the thing to have. They had an interior with shelves and drawers and a place to hang long garments or cloaks. They were typically made of wood, and sometimes they held frequently used items or clothing, and sometimes this is where the laundry went once it had been done. The 19th century saw the creation of a room to take off coats and boots called a mudroom. Coats were hung from hooks and the boots, well, wound up on the floor below them. The mudroom gave way to a smaller room by the front door. This became the closet, a closeted space for coats. Before the invention of closets, spirits were associated with hanging out in corners. People would report seeing a shimmering form begin to grow in the corner of the room. even up by the ceiling. Why did the spirits move from the corner of the room to the closet? I wonder. Maybe it has to do with when moving from dimension to dimension, there's little chance of encountering anyone in a closet or a small enclosed space. I did some looking and I found a few stories from folks who encountered things coming and going from their closets. One story is about somebody, I'll call her Jean. Jean grew up in a haunted house. There was a spirit that hung out in her closet. At first, Jean was really scared of this entity, and she had to have the door closed before she was able to sleep. Over time, she began to get the feeling that this spirit was an old lady who was actually there not to do any harm, but to protect her. This led to the question, protect Jean from what? Jean mentioned having a spirit in her closet, and surprisingly, her mother said she thought there might be one in her closet as well. Unlike Jean's closet spirit, the one in the mother's closet wasn't nice. Her mom would keep the door closed at all times, and once in a while she even dragged the dresser over to block the door. When Jean was older and married, she began to see shadowy images in the closet at night. Not just hers, but all throughout the house. Others said they could see these entities as well. People that didn't see anything did say that they felt as if they were being watched from the closets. Jean and her husband had moved not just to another house, but to another city. Still, the closet beings were there. They must have been following Jean, either keeping an eye on her or guarding her against something else. I talked about that elevator incident that me and my wife had several times on the show. I'll give those of you that didn't hear the story a quick rundown. My wife and I went to a hospital to visit someone. As we were approaching the elevators, a man came rushing from the emergency department and onto one of the cabs. The door closed, so I waited a few seconds to let him get on his way before pushing the call button. The same cab opened, showing us there was nobody inside. My wife described the exact same person that I had seen. We both thought this must have been a ghost. It was the best explanation at the time. Later, while reading reports and talking to people, I began to hear of others having similar encounters. People vanishing from small enclosed places. I still consider our sighting to have been a ghost, and my wife does as well, but maybe it was somebody stepping into a portal. While looking for stories of people disappearing from elevators, I stumbled on these next few. Now, I have no idea if these are true or just somebody making up weird stories. Some of that creepy pasta nonsense. You decide after listening for yourself. New York City, June 9th, 2017. Jennifer, a 14-year-old, went to visit her classmate, Mike, at his apartment on 21st Avenue. This apartment was new and it was equipped with CCTV cameras. Mike had seen Jean from his porch and he waved to her. She waved back to him and then got into the building lobby. CCTV footage captured her going into the elevator. She never arrived at Mike's door, and he wrote it off as maybe she was there to visit somebody else. That evening, Jennifer's parents called Mike asking if their daughter was still there and when would she be home. When they were told she had never got to Mike's apartment, they called the police. The police did a cursory investigation, asking neighbors if they'd seen the young girl, but nobody had, and they showed no suspicious activities, so the questioning was all they did at the time. The next morning, Jennifer was not at school, and the police began a more thorough investigation. The CCTV footage was examined, and the only sight of the young girl was her getting on to the elevator. There were no images of her ever getting off on any of the floors or leaving the building. Police began a door to door search. They received permission from all the residents to check their apartments, and no trace of Jennifer was ever found. July 24th, 2017, 27-year-old Heather was at work when she opted to take a break and step outside. They didn't allow smoking in the building. The building had CCTV cameras all over the place due to the high value contents and needed extra security. Heather didn't get home that night, so her husband began calling, trying to find out where she was. When none of her workers had any answers, her husband called the police. The police started looking at the video footage from all the exits, but they never saw Heather coming out of the building. Next, they checked the hallway cameras and saw her entering the elevator. The elevators also had cameras, so the footage was checked. There was Heather, standing in the cab. The video feed went dark for just a few seconds. When it cleared up, the cab was empty. Everybody just simply assumed there was something wrong with the camera, so they had a repairman go check it. A police officer named John returned to the building to interview Heather's colleagues. When he had finished up, he took the same elevator downstairs, and he vanished. The video feed from the cab went black for a few seconds, and when it came back on, the cab was empty. This really got the police into looking for explanations as to what happened to their investigator as well as the young lady. August 12th, 2017. Christian, a 42-year-old plumber, was last seen exiting a customer's apartment. When Christian didn't make it home by the next morning, his wife called the police. Upon arriving, police noticed that his work vehicle was still parked outside the apartment. They began noticing striking similarities between his disappearance and the other three. I like to look into any weird stories I read to figure out if the story has any validity. The weirder the story, the better the evidence needs to be. I looked for any reports of missing police detectives, missing people from elevators, things like that, all being reported from New York. I couldn't find any corroborating reports. However, had several people all vanished from elevators in and around the same area, would the authorities want anybody to know? Would they take steps to make the stories go away? Would the government lie to us about things like this? Probably. I've run into tamperings on several research projects that I was working on. I'll search the internet looking for a story that I know I read a few years ago. All I find are those commie fact checkers saying no such event ever took place. This will get me to digging into my library and having a go. The story I'm looking for will be there in black and white. Those who control the information and the spice control the universe. I kept hearing about the elevator game, and I thought just maybe this had some connection to the people vanishing. In order to play, you board an elevator in a building with at least 10 stories. You ride to the fourth, second, sixth, 10th, and fifth floors in that order. Some say you have to do this while alone, while others say that you can play as a group. When the doors open on the fifth floor, you may encounter a strange looking woman who just might look familiar. She may also get on board the elevator with you. By no means should you interact with her. Wait for the doors to close so you can go to the next floor. You must stay in the elevator as it arrives on each floor. Once you're about to leave the fifth floor, you push the button for the first floor. The elevator might take you up to the 10th floor instead. Once you're there, you can explore the other world. In this other world, the things are going to look a little off. Strange lights, odd noises, chilling presence. Make sure you keep track of where you are so you can find your way back to that same elevator. If you get confused, winding up lost, you might become stuck in the other world. Oh, that weird looking woman from the fifth floor? She might be in the other world as well. Don't talk to her or have any interaction with her. She might just cause you to get stuck there with her. When it's time to get out of this place, you must return to the elevator that you arrived on. You ride the elevator to the fourth, second, sixth, 10th, and fifth floors in that order. Then you press the button for the first floor. If the elevator takes you to the first floor, check your surroundings to make sure everything looks normal and then exit the building immediately. Who is this strange woman from the fifth floor? The elevator game was partially inspired by Elisa Lam, the Canadian student that died in the water tank at the Cecil Hotel. If you watch the videos of her from the elevator, she was definitely doing some strange things. The game is bizarre, but it doesn't explain away a police detective vanishing. Cops do have a sense of humor, and on occasion they might mess around, but would a cop try playing a game to see if it might work? Come to think of it, maybe the officer had heard about the elevator game, and he thought, "Let's see what happens." Sometimes when I was at work, we were known to do some unusual things. Nothing illegal, but things best not talked about. Not very smart either. Ollie worked in an old building in downtown San Antonio. He was in a hurry to get down to the first floor, so instead of taking the elevator, he was going to use the escalator. He walked past the freight elevator and he glanced in as he went by. This was one of those old elevators with the gate that you had to pull shut with a strap. Inside the gate was a second gate that you had to pull down from above, as a second section would come up from the floor. When you pushed the up or down button, a bell would ring to let people know that the cab was going to move. Inside the cab, light looked odd. Instead of being white, the inside looked dim, as if the light was covered with dirt, or maybe it was just a 25-watt bulb. In the middle of the floor sat an old-style mail cart, something from the late 50s or 60s. Ollie didn't think anything of it. seeing the cart there, and he was in a hurry to get downstairs. At the escalator, he walked as the conveyance moved along, making it down to the first floor very quickly. He turned and he walked back past the freight elevator. The gate was open, and the lights inside were now bright and white. He stopped in his tracks and he looked into the cab. The cart was gone. It dawned on him there had been no bell ringing or sound of the elevator moving. How could anybody have gotten the cab from the second to the first floor in less time than it had taken him to run down the escalator? Plus, the lights were now twice as bright as they had been. We talked it over and we came up with a possible explanation. This might have been what is known as a time slip. Ollie may have stepped from our time back into the 1960s and then back just in a few seconds. Back when I worked for a living, we had to take continuing training hours in order to keep our paramedic certifications. One of the perks of being a Border Patrol agent medic. On occasion, we stayed in some not so nice hotels, and in others, we were treated to some places that I could never afford. One time, we were told to stay in an old beat up RV parked on a military base. That was our home for the weekend. It leaked. It was the luck of the draw. You never knew when you signed up for a training class where the government was going to send you. The government was paying, and they always got a discount. They would pay $95 for a $250 room. One year, we wound up staying at the Adolphus Hotel in Dallas. I felt way out of league. The hotel room was almost as big as my house. Training was at the convention center, so we could walk back and forth. It was only about a block and a half away. I got back to the hotel after a long day and headed to the elevator to go up to my room. As I was walking to the bank of cabs, a door opened all by itself to the left. I didn't think anything of it until the door slid shut. I hadn't pushed the button, and this cab was old and creepy looking. I thought, well, maybe somebody had pushed the button to call for the elevator on the next floor, but then why did the door open as I was walking up to it? This was not a guest elevator. This was reserved for the staff. It was dark, and the decorations from a few decades ago, maybe a dozen. The wood paneling was dark stained, and there were no mirrors on any of the walls. It was just four dark, dingy looking wooden things on all sides of you. I hadn't pushed any buttons for the cab to move, but it started on its way up to the 10th floor. The little button lit up, showing where I was heading. Once again, I thought, okay, somebody on the 10th floor must have called for the cab. As I'm standing there in this dark, dingy little elevator, I got to thinking about that movie, Devil. A man jumps to his death from a Philadelphia skyscraper, leaving behind a suicide note saying that the devil was approaching soon. Shortly thereafter, an elevator in the same skyscraper becomes stuck with 5 people in it. One, a security guard, a former Marine who is now a mechanic, a mattress salesman, a young woman, and an elderly woman. While a repairman is attempting to fix the elevator, one of the security guards in the building is watching the security camera. He sees a face in the monitor that he thinks is the devil, while the lights are flickering on and off. When the lights return to normal, the young woman has a bite mark on her back, and the salesman has blood on his hands. I'm standing there in this dark little elevator thinking about that movie. I was tempted to hit all the buttons and just jump off on whatever floor I was at. I also got to thinking, what if I hit all these buttons and nothing happened? Or worse, what if it stopped moving altogether? One time in Monterrey, Mexico, me and my wife were on an elevator that got stuck between floors. It took the staff about 45 minutes to pry the door open so we could climb out. All these thoughts were bouncing around in my head until the doors opened and there I was on the 10th floor. I stepped out wondering how the cab knew which floor I'd been heading to. There was nobody there waiting. Could one of the other medics have been pranking me? That would have required way more activity than anyone I worked with was willing to try after a long day of training. Plus, how would they even know I was going to go to that cab? Elevators usually have mirrors on one or two of the walls, sometimes all three. It gives the illusion of the inside cab being bigger so folks riding don't feel all claustrophobic. If you look into a mirror long enough, you're supposed to see things, spirits, ghosts, beings from other dimensions. A woman was riding alone in an elevator in Arizona when she thought she saw somebody standing next to her reflected in the mirror. Quickly looking beside her, she saw there was no one there. The image in the mirror was tall and kind of distorted looking. Maybe it was just some imperfection in the mirror. Later in the week, one of her coworkers mentioned that she had seen something weird in the elevator mirror as well. When asked, the coworker said she'd seen a person standing next to her, tall and kind of blurry looking. Over the course of the next few months, everybody working in the building said that they had seen this same thing. It turned out a tall, older woman had died from a heart attack while riding in that elevator. The Avalon Theater in eastern Maryland is a well-known hotspot on the Chesapeake Ghost Walk tour, especially their elevator. One of the former owners of the theater tells of a murder that took place in the building. An actress was found dead in that elevator. The spirit of the woman has been seen entering and exiting the elevator. The spirit will stare right at you if you see her before she'll disappear back to wherever she had come from. The elevator is also known to move on its own without any warning. The ding sound that the elevator makes when it reaches its destination is quite loud and startling, especially for staff who are there working alone after hours. I hear about spirits and ghosts riding elevators all the time. Rosario and her supervisor were working late at night on a grant application at the health department. It was 11:45 and the paperwork had to be finished in order to send it off by a courier to Austin first thing in the morning. The cleaning staff finished for the night, and after turning the elevator off and securing it on the second floor, they left. This was done each and every night. Anyone working after hours would use the stairs instead. The last custodian had stopped by and handed Rosario the key to the front door. As soon as the two finished, they would lock up and leave. From then on, they had the building to themselves. Rosario and her boss were on the second floor, just around the corner from the elevator. The sound of the cab moving up and down was hard to miss. The unit was old and it made a lot of noise as it functioned. I've used it and it is loud. It rattles and it creaks and it groans. This is not something you would mistake as being anything else inside the building or out. They had just about finished and were about to leave when the sound caught them off guard. Was somebody in the building using the elevator? Was it safe to remain there all alone? The two made their way out of the office and walked towards the staircase, which took them right by the elevator. There it sat, the door locked open, turned off. Now they were both wondering, what did they hear if not the elevator? There's only the one in the building. There's nothing anywhere nearby that would mimic the sound. Rosario and her supervisor wasted no time getting out the door and into the safety of their vehicles. They do their best to never work later than the custodians from then on. The little girl, the well-known ghost who is seen all over town, has been seen at the health department, the mall, the college, the sports arena, several hotels all over town, as well as several schools. Eddie works at one of the big stores at the mall. If anything major has to be done, that they have to have a large work area, him and his partner will go in at night when the store is closed. One night they had to work on the escalator. Eddie would have to run upstairs to check on something, and the elevator would be upstairs and he'd have to wait for it to come back down. Once he was finished upstairs, he had to wait for the elevator to come back up. The elevator would go up and down on its own. After putting up with this most of the night, they decided the little girl that they called Ashley was messing around with the elevator. During the day, Eddie would hear boxes being thrown around in the linen department. He finally said, "If you're not going to help out, stop making a mess." He hopes Ashley would cooperate. The Sisters of Mercy came to Laredo and began working with the sick and injured people, many of whom were indigent, back in 1943. They occupied a few different buildings as their facility grew. For a few years, the hospital was on the west side of Jarvis Plaza. It was torn down to make way for an assisted living home. The place known as Old Mercy is on the corner of Logan and Garfield Streets. It was a six-story building that was added in onto several times. People working there told me about seeing a nun with a small child that would get into one of the elevators. The elevator was the one that went up to the top floor right next to the chapel. Many people said that they would see the nun and the child get in, but nobody ever saw them getting back out. The habit worn by this nun was from a long time ago. To round out the hour, I thought I would tell about how I lost a patient in Houston. He didn't die, but he vanished. I've told about him before, but the case falls into this story somewhat. It was about 1981, maybe 82. There was this guy who had decided that he wanted to stop drinking, and he'd been accepted into the VA recovery clinic in Houston. He needed a ride into town, so we said we would take him. He was already beginning to have DTs, so we bought him some beer to keep him alive. Literally. That's how we used to do it. The drive into town was pretty much uneventful, other than finding the clinic. It was on Main Street, but way at the far end, in the not very nice part of town. Come to think of it, no part of Houston is all that nice. I was born there, so I can talk. I hate Houston almost as much as Austin, almost as much as Dallas. Big cities just, they drive me nuts. We arrived, and then the fun began. The front door was locked, and we had to push a button and wait. Some guy came to a window mounted next to the door and looked at us to make sure that we didn't look like homeless bums or something. Then he asked us to step into the entryway. The door buzzed and we opened it. We stepped into a little room, had a locked door on both sides of us. We had to hand over our IDs through a little slot and then wait some more. Finally, we were cleared to enter the facility. The place was extremely secure. They didn't have any cameras in the hallways or over any of the entrances or anything like that, but all the doors and the windows were all locked. The windows had mesh screens over them. The nurse took our patient into a room and we got him settled in. Then we had the fun part, paperwork. I hate paperwork. The nurse's desk was right in front of the room where we had put the guy in. It had 4 beds, and 3 of the beds were already occupied. Now, this was like 2 o'clock in the morning, so everybody was asleep. We signed him in, and then, just before we left, I stuck my head into the room to wish my patient luck. He wasn't there. I looked in the bathroom. Then I told the nurse. The guy was not in the room. The nurse looked everywhere, and we looked everywhere with him, even under the beds. We woke up the other patients and asked them if they knew where the guy was, and they didn't even know that he had been there. We looked in every room in that hallway, plus a few others. We unlocked doors and looked inside to see if somehow he'd gotten in. The man had vanished. It took maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do the paperwork. There was no place to hide and no way to get outside without a key. He was gone. We never found him. His family never saw him again. To this day, I have no idea where he went or how he got there. It's one of those mysteries of life that when it happens to you, it really makes you wonder what's going on. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell people you don't even know that they should be listening to Strange Things with Chris James. If you're listening on one of the platforms that only has a few of the shows, and for some mysterious reason you want to hear all of them, you'll have to go to iHeartRadio under the podcast section where you'll find all, 450 shows that I've done. You can find most of them on YouTube, but a few have been deleted because of those fact checkers, those commies that don't want people talking about things like the big F. If you have a story that you believe is true, could have something to do with UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, conspiracies, or just something really weird that happened to you, a friend of yours, a relative, some story that your grandfather or your uncle told you. As long as you believe that it's a true story, send it to me at strangethings@arkanasa.com, and I'll put you in my next book. If you have any stories you'd like to hear me talk about, you can also get a hold of me there. strangethings@arkanasa.com. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.